The world's fascination with ancient Egypt has a long history. Greek rulers often portrayed themselves as pharaohs, and Romans dragged obelisks out of Egypt to adorn their cities, including Istanbul and Rome. Following Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798, Egyptomania gripped Europe, and amateur archaeologists began flocking to the country, unearthing massive temples and statues and excavating untold numbers of tombs, including the famous tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered by Howard Carter in 1915. But of all the impressive sites and artifacts found, the pyramids of ancient Egypt are unmatched in grandeur. The Egyptian pyramids of Giza are some of the most impressive man-made structures in history, hands down. It's estimated that they were built over 4,500 years ago with over 2 million stones, and took 20 to 30 years to make. But how were the Egyptian pyramids built exactly? It's still a secret. There is no evidence, no ancient plans, and certainly no shortage of conspiracy theories. Pyramids were built as funerary tombs for pharaohs and high-ranking officials from 2600 BCE to 1550 BCE. These massive monuments displayed a person's power and wealth and served as a place of ascension into the afterlife. Over 100 pyramids have been found in Egypt, mostly in clusters along the west bank of the Nile. The pyramids come in all shapes and sizes, from the early stepped pyramid of Djoser to the uniquely shaped bent pyramid, where the pyramid angle was changed midway through construction, to the three iconic pyramids of Giza, which have been dominating Cairo's horizon since 2550 BCE. Research on the pyramids has been taking place since the early 19th century, with early archaeologists clearing sand from the complexes and exploring the interior chambers, sometimes, unfortunately for the pyramid's preservation, with the help of dynamite, and later archaeologists scanning and restoring the monuments. However, for all the centuries of excavation and research, many pyramid mysteries remain. But that doesn't stop us from donning our historian hats and doing some digging. After watching countless YouTube videos and reading what feels like a million blogs, we've discovered that there are two major theories floating around: the ramp theory and the watershaft theory. So what's the difference? The ramp theory. The ramp theory, RT, is probably the most generally accepted and has the most evidence to back it up. In a nutshell, it discusses that the pyramids were made with sheer manpower and tens of thousands of workers. Stones were supposedly pulled across the desert with ropes and sleds, and it's only recently that the RT was updated to include that they would also wet the sand to reduce friction. The wet sand made the stones a lot easier to drag, and this practice can actually be seen in some ancient wall paintings. Once the stones were dragged across the desert, it's believed that one of a series of ramp options were erected to drag the stones to the top as they built upwards. With sand, workers created either a straight ramp up one side, a spiraling ramp that wrapped around the pyramid, or a combination of the two. Levers were also supposedly used once a significant height was reached and ramps were no longer feasible. This theory is supported by the fact that sleds are well documented in ancient wall paintings, as are images of giant statues being pulled by hundreds of men. These ramps would have, however, been very time-consuming to construct. The watershaft theory. The watershaft theory, WST, differs from the ramp theory at most points, starting with how the stones were transported. While the RT discusses dragging stones across the desert, the WST outlines that special canals were constructed all the way to the build sites, allowing the stones to float all the way there. Floats were supposedly made of cedar wood or inflated animal skins wrapped in papyrus, and when attached to the stones, would allow them to be pulled from the shore. The canals led to a moat that went all the way around the build site perimeter, allowing blocks to be floated to the side where they were needed. 4 water pipelines were then supposedly used to float the blocks uphill and were extended as the pyramid grew. A series of gates controlled how the blocks moved upward from the moat to the top, and a pool of water on the top of the build site allowed for further floating and positioning without any dragging or real heavy lifting. In this theory, these canals and water elevators allowed the stones to be moved pretty easily. Although there is no concrete documented evidence of this theory, traces of water throughout the structure and imperfections along the middle of all 4 sides have been identified to support the WST. Making the blocks. There's no real consensus on how the blocks were made either, and the WST has its own theory on block creation. Copper chisels or saws were used to cut the limestone, but the creation of precise cuts and angles without modern technology could have been done in a few ways. Some WST supporters say Egyptians used the surface of the water as a level and worked on the stone underwater, making it easier to manipulate. Others cite the use of simple tools such as wooden levels, paint, and string to measure the angles and detect spots that weren't level. Although the above are the most widely accepted theories, there are some intriguing alternatives floating around as well. Extraterrestrials, long-lost technologies, time travel, they go on and on. Find a summary of some of the best theories here. Regardless of what you believe, there's no arguing that the Egyptian pyramids are ridiculously impressive for the time period, and that we'll probably never get a concrete answer as to how they were built. We can all agree that it took an insane amount of intelligence and manpower, and that we're so fortunate to have them still standing after all these years. For now, we'll continue to listen to the newest theories, marvel over the pyramids themselves, and keep them on top of our travel bucket lists indefinitely. Pyramids continued to be built throughout the 5th and 6th dynasties, but the general quality and scale of their construction declined over this period, along with the power and wealth of the kings themselves. In the later Old Kingdom pyramids, beginning with that of King Unas, 2375 to 2345 BC, pyramid builders began to inscribe written accounts of events in the king's reign on the walls of the burial chamber and the rest of the pyramid's interior. Known as pyramid texts, these are the earliest significant religious compositions known from ancient Egypt. The last of the great pyramid builders was Pepi II, 2278 to 2184 BC, the second king of the 6th dynasty who came to power as a young boy and ruled for 94 years. By the time of his rule, Old Kingdom prosperity was dwindling, and the pharaoh had lost some of his quasi-divine status as the power of non-royal administrative officials grew. Pepi II's pyramid, built at Saqqara and completed some 30 years into his reign, was much shorter, 172 feet, than the others of the Old Kingdom. With Pepi's death, the kingdom and strong central government virtually collapsed, and Egypt entered a turbulent phase known as the First Intermediate Period. Later kings of the 12th dynasty would return to pyramid building during the so-called Middle Kingdom phase, but it was never on the same scale as the Great Pyramids. The pyramids today. Tomb robbers and other vandals in both ancient and modern times removed most of the bodies and funeral goods from Egypt's pyramids and plundered their exteriors as well. Stripped of most of their smooth white limestone coverings, the Great Pyramids no longer reach their original heights. Khufu's, for example, measures only 451 feet high. Nonetheless, millions of people continue to visit the pyramids each year, drawn by their towering grandeur and the enduring allure of Egypt's rich and glorious past.